Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is. It's about 12:40. No, it's 11:40. So today is February 19th, I think, and my son is still in Chicago, and I am back home in Central Illinois trying to get everything ready for him to come home. I'm on my way to go get some groceries, and I picked up the dogs yesterday from the kennel. They were exhausted. Poor things have been through a lot. They were away from home for almost 2 months. I'm still ripping out carpets and waxing floors, cleaning and waxing the house and disinfecting. About halfway done with that. Still got my son's supposed to come home on Thursday or Friday, probably Friday. So I've got about 4 more days to get that done. And it's going to be kind of tight. I am getting kind of tired, fatigued. I'm struggling to get back on my sleep routine. I drink caffeine during the day to try to keep me going, and then I have a hard time falling asleep at night, so my schedule's kind of messed up. I don't recommend you do that. I'm trying to drink my caffeine earlier in the day and get back on schedule starting today. And there's a lot of things going on that I'd like to talk about for my grandchildren. I went to a benefit for my son the other day, and my grandchildren were there, and I got to see them for the first time in a long time. And I played a game of pool with my grandson, and got to give my granddaughter a hug and kiss, and that was really nice. So nonetheless, I don't get to see them very often, so I'm making these videos mostly for them and for my son and any grandchildren that I might not be around to see, because I never got to meet my Grandpa Fogel, my dad's dad. He died when my dad was 11. So in my family history, that sort of thing happens, and family history is pretty important. It's been a big part of my family on both sides. We trace our ancestors back hundreds of years. So that's kind of a nice thing to have, to kind of know where you come from. And to be able to pray for your ancestors is very important. Because I guess that's something I could talk about. The spiritual world, being an Orthodox Christian, you can't put a lot of that stuff into words, which is why I keep trying to read the lives of the saints and the teachings of the church. Because Protestant Christianity and Roman Catholics have really neglected a lot of the deeper spiritual aspects of Holy Orthodox tradition and teachings, doctrines. They've lost a lot of the stuff that was taught in old times, and it makes a critical difference in your perceptions and understanding of God and the world and the saints. And so, and it's very difficult to put into words. You really can't. The Roman Catholics, or the West in general, is very big on trying to explain everything and how everything works in great detail, and they try to reveal mysteries of God and make them into like a science. And while science in its pure form is legitimate, science today has become much a religion of its own, and that it professes a lot of things as fact that are not really proven. For example, the evolution of man and versus the creation theory, which is not a theory, or climate change is another good example. They think that they've got it all figured out, but they really don't. When you actually look at the data yourself. you have an education, or excuse me, if you have an intelligence level that is equal or in the same ballpark as a scientist, you can read the same materials and data and come to your own conclusions. You don't have to be accredited, college certified PhD in order to read all the same books and comprehend what they say and come to your own conclusions. The only difference is that you haven't devoted your life as your career to being a scientist. There's lots of Mensa geniuses that are simple janitors like myself, or firefighters, or truck drivers, or whatever, teachers, like school teachers, high school teachers, grade school. You can do any job and be a genius. And geniuses are not without mistakes. I think I've said before, I have a lot of geniuses in my family, and I love them. No different than myself, but you have to understand that doesn't make you infallible. Excuse me. Geniuses make a lot of mistakes, just like everybody else. And if you put too much clout in your genius, then you can get yourself into trouble. It's too much trust. Because all good comes from God. Which brings me back to the main point I'm trying to get at, in that I hope my grandchildren devote more time into trying to get to know God and understand God and the teachings of the Orthodox Christian Church and the lives of the saints than they do in anything else in life. And it doesn't have to be all-consuming so that you don't function well in life. I mean, that's the way the ascetics were, the saints. But there have been saints who are normal lay people like myself, just doing whatever they do in God's presence and glorifying God in all that they do. Another huge important thing you need to understand, which a lot of people make the mistake of, is judging the church or God by the faults and mistakes of the people in the church that follow God. The church is a hospital, and we don't judge the church based on the faults and the failures of people involved trying to seek their salvation. We all make mistakes. The question is, are we following the teachings of the church and addressing those mistakes and correcting them and purifying ourselves to live a righteous and a life that glorifies God? And so it's really important. And I'm struggling also with a lot of the negativity in our society that's getting ready to turn into a war. It really already has in a lot of ways, different parts of the world and here. And the reason it's happened that way is because the devil tries to cause divisions and cause conflicts, because that's how he gets people to hate each other and kill each other. And so one of the things that the Orthodox Christianity teaches is that peacemakers are called the sons of God. And so we live in the world, but we don't want to be a part of the world in that respect. For an Orthodox Christian, if you're living with Christ in the church, you're living in heaven on earth. And anytime you depart from that, you get sucked into that darkness and that negativity, then it's hell on earth, literally. And that's what happens in war. And so we don't really want to participate in that. We want to try to bring peace to that. And the way you bring peace to that is you very patiently and consistently focus on living the way you should live yourself first. And then whenever things pop up to you, when you have situations come to you, or you're in your sphere of influence or existence, then you address them appropriately and move on. You don't want to get drawn into it to where that becomes your focus. That's something I struggle with, because having served in the military and taken oath to defend the Constitution and protect it from enemies both foreign and domestic, I took that oath seriously, and I feel obligated to try to stand up for what's right and protect the Constitution, which is severely being attacked right now in multiple ways. And when it's being overwhelmingly attacked, as it is right now, and has been for the past 10 or 20 years at least, if not a lot longer, it's coming to a head now, though. You feel like you gotta take on the world. You know, you feel like you're being attacked from multiple sides, and the solution to that is really don't get excited, don't get sucked into that. Just live your life doing what you're supposed to be doing, focus on God, going through your routine, being consistent in your work, loving to your neighbors and your enemies, but correct the wrongs when they come to you, when you have to deal with them. And try to give back something positive, something that's healing. Be a healing presence, which is a book that I'm reading right now, and I want to try to do a book report, a book summary on. Actually, I've read it a couple of times already. So, while I'm on that subject, I'm rambling a little bit, but it's only been 11 minutes. I read a ton of books, and I have since childhood. I've lost track of how many books I've read, but I've read a ton, and my father was the same way. Our house was a library. And I never stopped reading. But this whole thing of me trying to do book summaries is a whole different animal. It takes it multiplies the difficulty by about 10. I can speed read through a book in a matter of hours. You know, a 200-300 page book. I can go through the whole thing in a few hours and be done with it and get a lot out of it. I'm very good at taking books and digesting them and summarizing them in my mind as to what they are and what the main point is. But there's always multiple gems of information in there that's worth knowing. Sometimes I'm useless knowledge, but there's always a situation where it's useful. But anyway, eventually you get to the point where all that seems kind of pointless, and you know a ton of information, but how are you applying it in your life? You can sit around and read books all day and become really super smart, but if I can't convey or make that information and knowledge useful in a functional way that helps society, what good is it? I mean, it helps me. But in some ways it can become a handicap, because then I have difficulty connecting and identifying with people. Because I see things completely different. I have a much different perspective and much larger picture of the whole thing, of what's happening. And the person I'm dealing with doesn't have any of that. And so they see things quite differently, and it makes that from their perspective, they got it together. They know what they're thinking. They know what they're right. And I understand that, because if I was in their position, I would think the same thing. But I'm not in their position, and I see things quite differently. And because they lack the knowledge and information, and because there's so much that goes into gaining all that knowledge and information, and so many different books and perspectives that you have to read, it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, to communicate all that. So I don't know. I've come to the conclusion that that's not really a solution. It seems to me that the solution is that you have to accept that with knowledge comes sorrow, as the saints say, or the scriptures may say that, I can't remember. And that sorrow, you know, is part of the deal. You're not going to be able to convey everything that you know to other people. And you're going to be alone even when you're surrounded by people in a lot of ways. But that's true for all of us at the end of our lives when we die. And that's something I've witnessed multiple times working in hospice. When people die, they're surrounded by people in some cases. Sometimes they're alone. But they're the only ones going through the process, really, even with all the support they have. And that's basically what happens to all of us. So I don't, it's kind of stupid to feel sorry for yourself or to get too bent out of shape about it. That's just the way life is. I was reading in the scriptures the other day, the commentaries about heaven and hell, and a lot of people think that when you go to heaven, it's the same for everybody. But that's not really what the church teaches. There's different levels of heaven and hell, and it's based on your performance in life. No different than we experience in capitalism. Now the difference is that God is fair and the world is not. So, God sets things right, and we get judged individually. We don't all get the same measuring stick. That's why we should not be judging each other in this life. But we do need to try to do the best we can and not judge ourselves against other people and what they do and don't do. And that comes with sorrow. That comes with you're going to be an outcast at times. You're going to be ignored. And my father went through this with me and my brother and my mom and everybody else. He was shunned and he was mistreated and talked badly about, and he didn't get to see everything that's happened since he died that was a result of all these things that he suffered that benefited us. He didn't get to see that until after he died. So I believe that God lets people who have passed be aware of what's going on, even if they can't participate. But I don't know. So anyway, I'm rambling at this point, and it's 17-20 minutes. I need to wrap it up. That's one of the things about our genetics that you probably should know about, is that we're generally very quiet people, but once we get to talking, we tend to ramble and won't shut up. And it's because we got so many thoughts crammed in our head, I think, part of it. But it's kind of pointless to talk too much. I just want to talk enough that your grandchildren get to know me a little bit, and if you seek to learn about God and the teachings of the church and orthodoxies, you will understand me and my brother and my father and God and the saints a lot better. You're not going to get that in the world, and you can't understand orthodoxy outside of orthodoxy, because it's like any group or club. You can't understand what it's like to be a varsity football player if you're not a varsity football player. It looks different from the outside. You can see certain things, but it's not the same. That's true with anything. So I don't want to belabor that point, but it's a pretty big deal to become aware of. So God bless. Pray for me, a sinner. Over and out.